Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again, back with more Entitled People stories. The title story starts like this. I live in a rural part of Eastern Europe, or at least what used to be rural. There was a large migration of people coming over here in the last 100 years or so, and that made the need for more housing. That meant more farmland was sold off for homes. It also meant areas that where trees and wildlife got destroyed to make room for more homes and businesses. Then there were factories to make space for people to work and so on until we got to this point, where I am one of the few people left still living on a large piece of land growing crops and raising animals. I cannot say for sure, but I have a feeling that most people don't mind it because they understand this is where some of their food comes from. Without the few farms left, the price of vegetables and animal products would go up from needing to be imported. I dislike, but I'm not bitter about the place changing since I was a little kid. Hell, even as a little kid I was seeing fewer farms and more housing start, so I just knew of the pure rural area from stories from my grandfather and father. I even let locals ask me about possibly planting more of something or less of something depending on what the city as a whole enjoys. There is a problem though, and that is some of the people working as city officials that really wanted to get the last of the farming area eradicated. They wanted to make rooms for more factories and roads and whatever else they could think of. Me not wanting to sell my farm was seen as a huge insult to them, and they wanted to do anything they could to get their hands on it. At first it was polite with letters and people coming to my door and explaining how much money I could get by selling the property. That if I took it and moved somewhere cheap, I could basically not have to do much for the rest of my life. I would always tell them that I was not interested in selling the property. They understood that as needing to offer me more money, but when that did not work, they started to change tactics. Suddenly, they were not so nice anymore and told me that I had to get up to date with modern society and leave. They would insult me, calling me uneducated and not knowing anything about the world or how it really worked. I was insulted, but I didn't let them see that because the calmer I was, the more angry these city officials seemed to get at me. It was not until a few months after that they finally decided that if they couldn't persuade me with words, they would do it with actions. Keep in mind that the things I even caught happening were not done by them directly, but I knew they were behind it. It was no coincidence that random people would start doing this right around the same time the officials were being nasty about me not selling it. Anyway, the first thing that happened was that I noticed a fire in the morning when I woke up to tend to my animals. It was still dark, so even though I was not right there, I could spot it. By the time I put it out, a good number of my crops were destroyed and the land would take a lot of time and care to be able to plant there again. I was finding signs of the fire deep into the earth, so it must have been burning for a while. The next time was when I actually got a glimpse of somebody involved but didn't manage to catch them before they ran away. It was about the middle of the day this time and I heard a gunshot go off, and then the sounds of my animals going crazy. I saw a man drop the gun outside of my barn before sprinting away and jumping over my fence. He had shot a few of my cows and horses, killing them. I was furious and called the police to help me, but they could not really do anything. It was my gun, and after a couple of days of investigating, I was told the city decided to shut down the investigation. That made me really start to think that they were behind the entire thing. I even called one of their officers and told them that they were heartless and trying to scare me into selling the farm, which was not gonna work. The last thing they did came from the city official's office itself, and it was an order for my farm to be shut down as a health and safety hazard, claiming that I was selling tainted vegetables and animal products, adding chemicals and stuff that is not legal in my country. I knew that this was a total lie, and so did these officials. They had the bright idea that if I could not make any money on my farm, I would not have a choice but to sell it or go broke. They were not answering any calls from me either, so I was forced to go down myself and wait all day before I could finally get in to see one of these men. Man, what can I do for you today? Me, I think we both know why I am here. So let's cut the small talk and get to it. Man, I can understand wanting to unload the property before anything else is found, right? Sadly, because of the chemicals and burned land, the offer from the city to buy your land has gone down significantly. I can still draw up the papers today though and rush it as a favor to you. Me, I think you misunderstand why I'm here. I'm not selling my land over to the city. He was shocked and sure that was my entire reason for coming to his office in the first place. Man, then what exactly did you come to discuss? Me, I want to know just how you were able to find these suspected chemicals on my land without ever sending an inspector over to test the ground, or my animal feed, or even my animals for that matter. Man, it's very complicated and scientific. A farmer like you would not even begin to understand. Me? Right. Well, just know that I'm still not selling my land. I'm going to use all my extra time to make sure that you and your friends get exposed for exactly what you did. I walked out of there and headed back home in order to start planning my revenge. I know that he didn't feel threatened by me in the slightest, but I was going to use that to my advantage. He wanted to think that I was a dumb farmer, and I was going to let him think that for as long as I could get away with it. The less of a threat he assumed me to be, the better chance of my revenge actually working out. Jumping back to my younger years for a moment, my father also saw the changes happening to the area. He was worried that if all the farms were gone, I was going to have no other skills to fall back on and fail. My family had always just worked on the farm and did not care much about education past the basics that we needed to know, reading, writing, and the business of buying and selling. His worry though led me to be the first in my family to have a more traditional education at a school. As it turned out, I was pretty smart, and after high school, I went away to college where I got a degree in business. Well, being in a bigger city for 4 years just made me realize how much better I liked the farm. So I went back home and just used what I learned to make the farm business run better. I even got a minor in agricultural studies, which I find pretty funny because that is basically a huge part of my life since I was born. I was the exact opposite of what these people assumed a farmer was, and keeping that to myself was a huge part of my plan. In about 6 months there was going to be an election for positions in the city, and I wanted to get in on one of them. I pretty much dumped the money I had and some that I got as donations into my election. I was not gonna go for anything big or crazy, I just wanted to get my foot in the door. My entire campaign of working for the city was talking about how I had lived there my entire life and was devoted to the success of the city under any circumstances. It also helped being a local that people knew and talked to before. I was down to earth more than other people running, which helped my cause. The nail in the coffin though was that I used these guys' own thing against them. I gave speeches talking about how appalled I was when I found out from the city that there were chemicals in the ground I never knew about. That I wanted to make it my mission to use funds in order to make sure other people's land and drinking water were free of these harmful chemicals. They ate it up, and the only thing these city officials that hated me had to say was that I was uneducated, and that made me unqualified. That was when I finally hit them with the knowledge of my college degree, and they had nothing to use against me. Keep in mind that it was not a big city, so getting a spot on the city council was not some impossible feat or anything like that. I won, and now was working out of the same building as these men that had spent the better part of a year and a half torturing me and trying to force me out of my home. I knew from the start that they were corrupt, but trying to prove that would have been impossible with all of their resources. I started digging, but doing it slowly enough that I was not going to just get caught right away. So I was doing my actual job for the city while on the side looking for some specific things. One of which was the order from the corrupt city official for the police to drop the search for the arson from my farm. The other were documents about the chemicals and the false reports of a company being sent to my farm. They were so dumb they actually paid people out of their work accounts without stating what it was for exactly. I started calling these numbers and being very vague about getting them to do a job for me. That was when I found out one of these calls was to the man that they hired to burn my crops and shoot my animals. I could have probably exposed them at this point and got money for what I lost and my farm back. However, it was just not enough for me though. I wanted to really ruin their lives like they ruined mine. Digging even deeper, I finally found what I'd been looking for. They had been subtly stealing money from city funds and filtering it back into their own personal accounts. Doing this by using city money to hire companies for things that did not exist. Companies that were only a name, their names. I was going to expose them in front of everybody that I could and run their names into the mud so badly they would never be clean again. I'd already had a meeting where I was going to come out with my findings of my very useless project of looking for chemicals around the entire city. And spoiler alert, there were none anywhere. Including on my farm once, as actual work and investigation was being done. Also, for anybody wondering how I was working and running my farm, I wasn't. I was just doing this job while another farmer in the area, but outside city limits, agreed to house and take care of my animals for a while. I gave my findings to the public and relieved them of any worry chemicals in the ground might hurt them. Despite it not being the time or place to announce this, I was waiting for the one person to ask a question I knew was coming. Why does only your farm have the chemicals? It was the first thing I got asked, and I was ecstatic to tell them it didn't, and I found the first report was totally fake and the company listed did not even exist in the first place. That got people talking and asking questions like crazy about how I knew this and what did it mean. I just started going off about everything I found and how corrupt these 3 guys were the entire time. The money they had stolen, the men they had hired, and how they used the police to get away with it. By the time I got out of there, things were a mess for all 3 of those officials. They were trying to say and do anything to worm their way out of the situation, but it was too late. I submitted all my evidence to the proper department so they could do their own investigation of the same thing. I would have gone back to the farm in that moment if I could, but I couldn't exactly just stop doing an elected job. So I had to finish out my 2-year term before I could go back to my old life. Working for the city was just not something for me, no matter how hard I tried to really get into the job. Wearing suits and going over the same things again and again just did not make me happy the same way dirt and cows did. Anyway, nothing else I did could come close to exposing those guys anyway, and I was right that it created some serious backlash. They were tried and found guilty and not allowed to hold an office ever again. I also personally sued them for slander since they ruined the reputation of my farm with their lies and false claims. Of course, I was also suing them for the arson and death of the animals they got killed. By the time we went to court, I was actually done with my term and back on my farm since things moved extremely slow around here. I was given money for the damage to my farm, the death of my animals, and the slander. Since then, I've been getting back to how things were before and enjoying my life again. One thing I noticed was that I never got bothered anymore by the city about me wanting to sell my property. I don't know if they were scared because of what happened to the last 3 guys that tried, or they just got the message that I wasn't interested. I plan on living on my farm for as long as possible and only selling if there is nobody left to care for it. I know that over time some rural areas get populated and change completely. I kinda hope that this city will always have something to show its history as a rural area that was once filled with farmland. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I am so happy that the story had sort of a positive ending for the farmer, even though he had to endure all of this nightmare. It seems like some parts of Europe, especially the really rural ones in Eastern Europe, can be extremely corrupt, and it is still good to see a farmer come out on top of all of this mess. Anyway, if you enjoyed this super long story, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post a comment if you want to support me. Thank you so much. The next one is titled Neighbor Food Issues. I'm a 31-year-old single guy living alone in an apartment complex. I've lived there for 6 years. My neighbor across the hall, a woman around my age or a little younger, I actually don't know her first name but I'll call her Katie, lives across the hall from me diagonally and has for about 2 years. We exchange hellos but are not friendly, which is how it is with most of my neighbors. So I don't really know how to cook, and due to losing one of my part-time gigs, I don't have as much money for takeout anymore. I'm getting sick of eating cheap fast food or box mac and cheese. I'm gaining weight and I never feel great. This is where Katie comes in. I can always smell her cooking in the hall and it always smells amazing. I know it's not the other person at our end of our hall because it's a single old man, and I've even complimented it a few times. So anyway, I got the idea that I would offer to give her some money each week to cook a little extra and bring it over to me, or I can pick it up from her at night. She is cooking anyway, and then I would have very presumably delicious food. I asked her the next time I saw her and she looked surprised and said she could not because she was too busy. Which to me did not make sense because she cooks almost every day, but okay. The next time I saw her a few days later, I asked her if she was sure and upped the amount I was offering, and she said she was sure and that it was rude to ask me and that she is not a housekeeper for hire and I should get a housekeeper if that's what I want. She also called me a stranger even though we have talked in the halls before. Overall, she made me feel like a big jerk and really embarrassed for even asking her, and a little mad because she was acting like I was being creepy. I wasn't, trust me, she is not my type. I think asking her to split the cooking was not completely outlandish since she cooks every day anyway and it would not be hard to make a little more. So Reddit, am I the jerk? And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you think that OP is the jerk, aka the a-hole in the situation, or not? Let me know in the comments. And a user in the comments said, "You are the a-hole." She said, "No, stop asking, learn to cook, there's plenty of videos and subreddits to help you." Hell, get a slow cooker. It's really hard to screw things up with a slow cooker. Comment number 2, you are the a-hole for one. You're assuming a lot. You're assuming this woman has nothing better to do than to plan a menu, shop, cook, and serve you for a few extra dollars. Enjoying cooking for oneself does not mean that she wants to turn it into a business. Watch some YouTube videos on easy one meals and learn to feed yourself. And the next one is titled, You Think My Property Belongs to You? Nope, this is probably pretty tame even by petty revenge standards, but hopefully you guys will get a kick out of it. Years ago, when I lived at my mom's, I would mow the yard every week. It was a hill, too steep for a riding mower, and a hassle to mow with a push mower. It was rough, but I usually got it done. Our next door neighbor was an asshead and he didn't like us and we didn't like him. Long story short, he was the kind of guy to call the police if me and my friends were hanging out on the porch talking at a normal volume before 11 p.m, which is the city's noise ordinance time. A real prick. He got his hillside terraced and the bricks he used jutted into our yard a few inches. When I mowed, I would just go straight down the hill from where the edge of his bricks were, and that was the edge of one side of the yard. The terraces did not go all the way down the hill, so about halfway down I would clear the bricks and it would be open. Well, apparently, one day he decided that the property line did matter and he would flat out refuse to mow a strip adjacent to our yard. The 6 inches or so that the brick terraces covered made my edge line slightly off, but my reasoning was that if he considered it part of his yard when he got the landscaping done, it was part of his yard when he wanted to mow. He disagreed, and slowly a narrow strip of grass would grow, a green mohawk of pettiness dividing our yards. He was a meticulous gardener, often out on sunny days tending to his garden, keeping his grass in pristine green condition. He cared very deeply about his yard and therefore assumed that anyone else would care about their yard almost as much. However, I did not give a damn about the yard or its appearance. I literally only mowed because my mom told me to. If the decision to mow was left up to me, it would have blossomed into a Costa Rican rainforest. With music blasting in my headphones, I would mow right next to that yard hog every week, and it would have been absolutely no skin off my nose to move the mower over 6 inches and trim the hog. But I didn't, because that was extra work my lazy ass didn't want to do, and also F him. So for at least a solid 1.5 months one summer, he engaged me in a battle of wills, sometimes literally watching me go right past the yard hog while refusing to mow it when he did his yard. One time, I caught him staring and waved. He must have assumed that I had an iron will to refuse to bow to his silent demand that I mow that 6-inch wide 50-foot long stretch of grass when my motivations lay entirely in the realm of apathy, laziness, and pettiness. And one day, one sweet day that I will always remember, I saw him using his full weight to body his mower over the now nearly 2-foot tall grass. The yard hog popped up a few more times, but it never got that tall again, and I sure as hell never mowed it. F you, Dave. And the next one is titled, The Best Ongoing Revenge of All Time. So this is an ongoing battle, but I think at this point I have gotten my revenge and then some even more. So basically, my block has an alleyway that is fairly narrow, and many of the houses have driveways that exit to the alleyway to the main road. The lots on the opposite side of the alleyway are also offset a bit, so there are 2 driveways directly across from what used to be my backyard fence. And between these driveways is a giant shrub that both of the neighbors refuse to get trimmed or removed. So it reduces visibility pretty heavily. This usually means that they make some sharper turns backing out, since it spills over the end of each of their driveways. Anyway, my backyard fence was about 1.5 feet into my property, and there is plenty of room to back into the alleyway from both my neighbors' driveways. However, both of them back out and pay little to no attention, so over the last 2.5 years I have lived here, at least twice a day, both of them hit or scraped the fence to the point where one day the neighbor to the right hit the fence so hard, half of it came down. To keep it shorter, and I know this has been a verbose post so far, in this part, yes, we did contact the neighbor and give them an invoice for getting our fence fixed, and yes, we have video footage of both neighbors hitting it, and yes, we have contacted the local courts, but that has been fruitless since getting a civil case like this would-be is not even close to a priority to them currently. So my wife and I decided to take some more drastic action. Since we knew another chain link fence would just get destroyed again, we went with a brick and concrete wall that also gave us the benefit of more privacy and a much more substantial iron gate to the alleyway for our access. Of course, the best part is we had the contractor put it just 1 foot in on our property instead of the 1.5 feet, and yes, we checked with the city to see if it was legal, it was, so there is even less of a buffer zone for both neighbors to back out like idiots. And the next one is titled Wrong Parking Lot. I was a teacher at a preschool on a very busy 6-lane road with bicycle lanes. Next to the preschool is a small compact shopping center that has the very popular Trader Joe's as the anchor store. Their parking lot entrance is immediately right after ours. The preschool's big signage is at the very narrow entrance. 2 cars can squeak by, but very tight. Also, there is a tall chain link fence and several beautiful flowering bushes that separated the 2 parking lots. Being a preschool teacher, once upon a time, a tired and weary teacher on a glorious Friday Eve had set out to return to her humble abode. Her Prince Charming was waiting. I was the last of the teachers to set out for the weekend and the parking lot was empty. I pulled up to the sidewalk to join the hordes of busy subjects racing hither and thither. I have to cross over 3 lanes to reverse my direction and take a while for the stars and planets to align. I am in the middle of the driveway. There is no reason for any carriages to pull in. All the tiny humans have been picked up. Traffic is rolling slow and I have to wait. Then all of a sudden, this shiny new black carriage driven by an evil which cannot be described comes screaming down the bicycle lane like she had heard her castle has come under attack. But no. She starts to inch towards me and to pull into the school's parking lot. I gleefully shake my head and point towards the other entrance. Fair lady, Trader Joe's is just yonder. You have the wrong parking lot. Her round black eyes transformed into a sinister glare and waggled her finger at me like a magic wand and pointed with all her might for me to back up. I sat there dumbfounded that she waggled her finger at me. I happily chortled to myself and waggled back, again trying to have her gaze upon the yonder parking lot. This action infuriated our evil driver as she inches closer to my carriage, and again. The nerve, as she was wanted to enter my kingdom. Okay, if the evil woman wants in, so be it. I reverse my carriage so the witch can maneuver past me. She speeds into the parking lot only to come to a screeching halt. Now this fair maiden is not in such a rush to go home. The evil witch whips around and is behind me to exit. I can feel the stare of her black eyes and hear the drumming of her nails on the steering wheel as we both wait for traffic to ease. And that is, my friends, what you would call perfect petty revenge. And by the way, I'm really curious, if you have ever gotten petty revenge on someone, please let us know in the comments how it went. Either way, thank you very much for watching. I hope to see you again tomorrow.